Dear BalkanPod listeners, I'm Dilek Kütük from Turkey. Today we're gonna talk about the young people's political participation and their expectation from the government in Serbia. I discussed this issue with young European ambassador of Serbia, Aleksandar Ljubomirovic. As we know, he attaches great importance to programs in support of youth. This young European ambassadors initiative has been launched by the Commission in 2020 as part of the EU regional communication program for the Western Balkans. So it seems that the majority of the young people in Serbia are slowly rising up against President Vučić and also opposition parties. So let's learn what's happening in Serbia in this pod. Dear Aleksandar, welcome to BalkanPod.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It is a great honor to be here and talk to you about the recent political issues on the Balkan Peninsula.
The same for me, actually. I'm so happy to talk with you as a young European ambassador of Serbia. I know you're a very talented and enthusiastic young man who is interested in political issues. So thank you very much for accepting my invitation.
Thank you very much for the kind words. It's always a pleasure.
My first question will be about you. Could you just briefly introduce yourself and could you tell us what is the Young European Ambassador's mission and what do you do?
This year, the European Union has started the project Young European Ambassadors of the Western Balkans. So we have 6 Western Balkan countries who are engaged in that project, and every country has 10 representatives, so 5 ambassadors and 5 attaches. And for example, one of the biggest tasks and biggest ideas of the project is that we, the young people, should be and must be the voice of all the young people from the Western Balkans and give them some kind of hope for a better future and motivate them to engage in political activism and so on. So yeah, that's like one of the biggest ideas behind the project. And yeah, so the project started in the year 2020 for the first time because, as you well know, the 6 Western Balkan countries are not members of the EU. Some of them are candidates, some of them are potential candidates. So one of our tasks as well is going to be the promotion of EU values and norms within the youth of the Western Balkans. And this is also a great honor for me because I've always shared values of the European Union since I was a small child. And my education in Germany also is one of the biggest motivations why I agreed to participate in that project. So I spent my last 6 years away from home. I've been living and studying abroad, first in Munich, where I finished 2 faculties, and then afterwards I moved to Berlin for my master's studies. And the experience abroad helped me to broaden my visions and helped me to see what the Balkan countries can enforce to be better in the near and distant future. So in my opinion, there are a lot of positive facts and positive stuff in Europe, so let's say the western part of Europe to be exact, that we can learn about and also enforce and embrace in our countries. So I just want to, at this point, tell you something about the mentality of the Balkan people. So in the last 30 years, so since the wars and everything, there is a common opinion within the Balkan people that nothing can change and that nothing can be better in our countries. Newer generations do not share the same opinion, and we strive and we hope that our generations are going to be the ones who change the countries for the better, and that our generation will catch up with other countries from the Western Europe so that we can all live in a civilized and developed world.
That's really great point that you drove attention. You say that the newer generation is not like the older generation, so they can change the politics in Serbia and in the Balkans. That's really great point. Thank you for sharing this point with us. In the region, many youth initiatives have been launched since the beginning of the European membership process, as you mentioned before. And I think one of the most important steps was the establishment of regional youth cooperation Generation Office, RYCO. Actually, I'm wondering, what do these kinds of initiatives do for young generation? Do you think that they have capacity to solve the youth unemployment, education problems, nationalism problems, maybe hopelessness in the region, etc.?
That is actually a great question, and I'm glad that you mentioned the term nationalism. So nationalism was a big issue in the 90s in all of the countries, most importantly in the countries of former Yugoslavia and Albania as well. And we had big issues with nationalism and nationalist leaders. In my opinion, that time has gone, and we are looking forward to newer generations who are patriotic. So that is really important in my opinion. So the newer generations love their own countries and want to help their countries to develop, but also want regionalized cooperation, so regional cooperation between the Balkan countries. So that is really, really important. And I've noticed it as a young European ambassador that also young people from other countries are patriotic as well, but that is not a problem per se. It helps us develop our countries, but it doesn't hinder us from regional cooperation. So it is really important that the youth cares about their own countries and as well is trying to develop a regional cooperation between the disputed parties from the 90s. And of course, youth initiatives like RICO, like Erasmus Plus, like EU projects help us to meet one another, to work on projects, and also to break prejudice that we maybe had when we were little. So youth initiatives are a key point in solving the bad relations between our countries. And for example, when you apply for projects within those youth initiatives like RICO or EU projects, one of the most important preconditions is the cooperation between youth organizations from Western Balkan countries. So if you want to receive funds for projects, you have to cooperate with similar youth organizations from, let's say, Bosnia, from Albania, from Montenegro, from Macedonia, and so on. And that is really, really important. The youth initiatives give us the opportunity to work with like-minded young people from other Western Balkan countries. And through that cooperation, and when we notice that they're not different from us, we see that the prejudice that the generations of our parents and grandparents have told us about are nothing more than made up stories. And that breaking of prejudice helps us to make new friendships and help us to create new ideas, new regional ideas, which will grow and even further and develop a close tie and a close friendship between our nations.
I see an additional question. Do you think that these ideas that you create in this kind of initiative affect the political life in the region? Do you have some example?
Yes. So from my personal opinion and from my personal experience, young people haven't still been able to influence politics on a higher level, but that doesn't mean that they haven't been active. So there's a whole new trend on the Balkan Peninsula. People who have studied abroad, but also people who have studied in their own countries, have started their own firms, companies, startups, and are doing really well in that area. So most importantly, in that private sector. So young people of the 21st century have seen that they can make a small or even a large influence through the private sector and through startups. That is also really important because that trend has also come to us from the West. But I'm also positive when we talk about influencing politics. And I told you that as well, that I think that my generation and the generations to come will make a huge political pressure on the political elite and the government. And at some point, the government and the political elite will not be able to put us aside and ignore us. And at one point, we will be a too large political factor to be ignored. And at one point, young people from the Balkans will influence politics for the better.
Okay, Okay, let's talk a little bit about politics in Serbia. There have been many protests in Serbia since 2018, I think. And as far as I see, especially the young people have fury against the Vučić government. What exactly do young people expect from the government and also from the opposition parties? Could you explain us?
Of course, of course. I'm going to gladly explain everything to you. When 2012, the Progressive Party, Serbian Progressive Party, came to power, and let's say, the mandate of the Democratic Party has ended, which lasted between the year 2000, since the revolution, until 2012. So for 12 years, we had the Democratic Party in power, and since 2012, for the last 8 or let's say now 9 years, we had the Serbian Progressive Party with their leader Aleksandar Vučić, who has first been minister, then prime minister, now president, which is also really, really interesting. The opposition to Vučić and the protests against the current government have been growing since 2017 and 2018. And in the year 2020, so last year, in the month of July, we had big demonstrations against his corona politics. So protests were mainly against lockdowns and restrictions. And this is also really interesting because in March and April, we had one of the worst restrictions in the world after China, Russia, or France. So we were among the countries with the biggest restrictions against corona. We weren't able to leave our homes after a certain point in day. And after April, Vučić had his elections where he was the absolute favorite to win. And after only several weeks, all of the restrictions were gone because of those elections, and the number of the corona infected people were manipulated with. So until the time of the elections, everybody, the media told us that we only had like 80, 90 to 100 infected people and new cases of corona per day. And this very next day after the elections, we had between 700 and 800 infected people. So there was a huge manipulation with the facts and the numbers of the people who were actually infected by the new coronavirus. And after the elections, which were, of course, won by the Progressive Party and Aleksandar Vučić, the president wanted to embrace newer restrictions, even worse than the ones in March and April. And that's why protests even came into action. And they were not as big as the protests in 2017 and 18, when there were nearly to 50, 60,000 people in Belgrade on the streets. These protests in 2020 were much smaller, around 10,000, 15,000 people. And this is actually one of the bad trends in Serbia. Protests and demonstrations in the last 3 to 4 years do not influence and do not change anything. So people go onto the streets, people protest, and they don't change anything. And when they influence something, those are small victories, baby victories, and nothing, the core of the problem doesn't change. And to come to the point about the opposition parties who are currently fighting against the regime and fighting against Progressive Party, those are small parties made of former politicians of the Democratic Party who was in power between 2000 and 2012, and the people do not like them as well. So the Serbian citizens are not in favor of the Vučić regime, but are also not in favor of the opposition parties, because they are nothing more than former politicians of the Democratic parties who have formed their own newer but smaller oppositional parties. So currently we have that big problem in Serbia where there is no hope for the common people. There is no political party that can unite all of the common people and all of the majority, actually, because in the elections in 2020, something about 30% of all the Serbian citizens, so Serbia has 7 million people, only 30% of the people in Belgrade went to vote, and only 45% of all people in Serbia on a national level went to vote, went to the elections. And that is a huge problem which needs to be tackled soon, because if the majority of the people doesn't vote, the institutions aren't democratical. And if the institutions aren't democratical, the nation isn't democratic. And we don't have democracy in Serbia, in our nation, then we are no different than the governments that we had in the 90s. So during the 90s, the generations of our parents fought for democracy. Democracy came in the year 2000, but also went away in the year 2012. And our generation has to repeat everything that was done in the 90s, but be more effective and have better results than the generation of our parents, so that the democratic institutions are going to last longer than they did for the 12 years between 2000 and 2012.
Actually, for me, the interesting comment made by you is that we protest, but anything changes. So my question would be about this. Do the political elites in Serbia take into account the protest, wishes, and dreams of the young people? I mean, if anything changed, so how do you see the future of young people's political participation and their contribution to the decision-making process in Serbia?
Now we are actually coming to the decisive questions, to the most important and most interesting question. And I think that the younger generations have the needed capacity to change things for the better, not only in Serbia, but also in the other countries of the Balkan Peninsula. But they're still waiting for the right moment. So the younger generations usually do not identify themselves with the ruling party, so the Progressive Party, and they usually do not identify themselves with the oppositional parties. So the young people are caught somewhere in between, and they are still searching for some kind of a shepherd who would lead them and who would unite them. And this is a critical point. So if in the next 5 to 10 years, Serbia finds its like savior, its shepherd, who can unite all of the quality and intelligent younger generation, the one who has studied in Serbia, but also the one who has studied abroad and returned to Serbia, the person who can unite those two groups of young people will be the one who changes Serbia for the better, and he's the one who will lead Serbia towards a more civilized and developed future. And the intellectual elite has been talking about that for the past, let's say, 5 to 10 years. So the intellectual elite always says that 50 to 100 young, patriotic, and intelligent people can change Serbia for the better. And it is not as we don't have like 50 or 100 people. We do. We even have more than 100. But the thing is, we still don't have that one person who will unite all of those people into one political party, into one entity, and go into politics and engage in a fight for a better future against the Progressive Party, but also against the oppositional parties.
Thank you very much, dear Aleksandar. It was really great conversation. I wish you success in your whole life.
Thank you very much for the invitation once again. I really hope that we will stay in touch and that you're eagerly going to follow all the political developments on the Balkan Peninsula and in Serbia as well. And I'm going to give you a small hint. Some things are going to change for the better really soon, and it will be interesting. So the newer developments in the Balkan Peninsula will and are going to be really, really interesting to follow.
Okay. Dear BalkanPod listeners, see you next week.